Hey, it's Ryan. You know me. I'm that guy, the guy that runs the book club. This is going to be an interesting one. I'm recording The Princess Bride with my wife. This is a special one for a few reasons. It's my wife's favorite book. It's also, the recording process has been interesting because it took 2 years. Today is May 24th, 2024. I started recording these episodes with Cara 2 years ago. We went on quite an extended recording hiatus because she was accepted into grad school, and she has been working on getting her master's degree in education. She's going to be wrapping that up soon. It's also special because this first episode is coming out on October 1st. The significance of that is yesterday is the anniversary of our first date, our 7th year anniversary of our first date. And October 2nd is going to be our 3rd wedding anniversary. And so then sandwiched in between those 2 anniversaries is going to be the first episode of this. And I just thought I noticed that at the beginning of the year, and I thought that was going to be something really extremely special. So I'm dedicating all of these episodes that I'm doing with Cara to my wife. Thank you so much for doing this with me. I love you so much, and I hope all of you enjoy listening to us talk about my wife's favorite book. So here's the thing about the 10 seconds of silence that always, it's why I hate it every time, because it's like, it makes the beginning such a huge introduction. It's like, there's like, after that 10 seconds of silence, I feel this expectation to say something amazing. And I never do. So I'm like, hey, this is Functionally Literate. I'm Ryan.
I'm Cara.
And and that feels stupid.
Okay. All right. I hear you.
Who are you?
I'm Cara Carter. I'm Ryan's wife. He married me.
That's right.
He put a ring on my finger. You can't see it, but it's there.
It's there, and it's very pretty. Don't you love being in an audio medium and gesturing?
Yeah, I do. Isn't it great?
Like, I wonder...
My theater training is really kicking in now. So glad I got that theater degree from Stevens College. Sponsor us, Stevens. Or don't. I don't make your decisions for you.
No, you want Boba Tea to sponsor us.
Yes, Bubble Cup, sponsor us, please. We'll give you a shout out every episode. Just give me free boba tea. You don't have to give Ryan free boba tea. Just me.
And my wife is here with me this week to read one of her favorite books.
The Princess Bride by William Goldman.
By S. Morgenstern.
By William Goldman.
The abridgment, yeah.
Yeah, the abridgment of the totally real fable by the totally real person S. Morgenstern.
Which I read all about in the 3 introductions that we are reading today. That's right, for people that have never read
The Princess Bride.
Or didn't care to read the introductions of
The Princess Bride.
Because some people might just skip the introduction.
Yeah, unfortunately, even though it takes up quite literally the first, 4th of the book.
I mean, I think for me personally, I would have skipped the introduction and then realized how much I was skipping and might want to look into it. But also, not when I was in school. Because, I'm thinking of my high school textbook, that introduction. It was, about as long as this, if I'm thinking about it.
We got the 30th anniversary edition, So it has the 30th anniversary introduction, the 25th anniversary introduction, and the actual introduction from the book. The one that started with the original book.
It was really interesting reading these introductions. So, because I'm reading it backwards. So what I can glean from this is, we have this really sweet old man. And then we have this guy talking about his movie. And then we have just this fucking bastard.
He is a bastard. He is a bastard, but we love him all the same.
In the third introduction, when he's at his youngest.
Yes, and he's talking about his son, Jason. He is so mean to Jason, for no reason. No reason. That poor child. And he talks about Helen, his wife, who, by the way, none of them are real. So the thing about The Princess Bride is it's very much satirical. And it is a story within a story. When William Goldman was writing The Princess Bride, he was basing it off the stories his daughters would ask from him at bedtime. So they would always ask about stories from giants and stories about princesses and sword fighting and sports. So he took all the stories he told his daughters and wrote a book about it. But then as he was writing, he realized it wasn't quite his normal style. So he wrote The Princess Bride, which is very dry sense of humor. If you've only seen the movie and you've never read the book, there's quite a bit you're missing, because The Princess Bride, the movie, is told completely in earnest, and it was written by William Goldman. The screenplay was written by William Goldman, which he goes over in the introduction how much of a pain in the ass it was to get the rights back from Fox so he could write the screenplay. Because he sold it to Fox, and Fox kept pussyfooting around, saying, oh, you know, we might make this movie, and then they fired the greenlight guy, and so they scrapped this project. And then the new greenlight guy was like, oh, we might make this movie, and then they fired that greenlight guy. And they scrapped the project, because as soon as you fire a greenlight guy in Hollywood, all of that greenlight guy's projects go away.
That's one of the stories mentioned in the second introduction. He has this whole passage where he talks about the green light guy at Fox, and how that green light guy got fired, and then he proceeds to tell a story about like 5 green light guys over the course of 10 years who got fired right before
the movie was supposed to film. And the thing about The Princess Bride, when it hit movie theaters in 1984, it wasn't that popular in the movie theater. It wasn't really until it came out on video that it reached its cult status that it has today. It became really popular. And The Princess Bride is really special to me because it's the first story I remember my mom reading me. She skipped all the satirical bits, and it was very much like the movie where she read only the good bits that I would be interested in. So there's a bunch of notes throughout the book that are like editor notes, because the way William Goldman, his framing device is that he is abridging the original tale written by S. Morgenstern. Mm-hmm. And so he's cutting out all the boring bits that kids wouldn't like, because the story is he remembered the book and he got a copy of it for his son Jason on his 10th birthday. And he asked Jason to read it because it was one of his favorites as a kid. His father read it to him when he was sick as a child, is the story. And when he gets home, he realizes that Jason did not read it at all because it got super boring. And he was like, no, it didn't. There's no way it got super boring. And he reads it and he's like, oh my God, this is super boring.
I loved the way that he found out about this, because the story up until that point is him doing everything he can to get a copy of The Princess Bride for his son to read. And it's so funny because he tells the story of how it was introduced to him. He didn't read it. His dad read it to him while he was sick. He read it to him in a very specific set of circumstances, and he did not recreate that for his son. He just got his son the book, and he didn't even realize how fucked up the book was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it had all this boring shit in it that no 10-year-old cares about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he's just devastated. And then he's sitting there reading through the book and he's like, oh, this is no good. And so he decides to put off the movie deal he's working on to write the book and to abridge the book. And so there are several editor notes without asking him for help. Like, what does this mean? what's going on here, help, or abridgments where he'll stop the story and be like, okay, I know that you're worried about this. Don't be. It's fine. Like, here's what Morgenstern was trying to do. And it's set in this fictional country called Florin, which in the universe of The Princess Bride is a real country. And he is a descendant from Florin. And so is Stephen King. Which it makes sense why Stephen King is later. Because it's not introduced in the first introduction. But then after The Princess Bride came out, William Goldman wrote 2 screenplay adaptations of Misery and Dreamcatcher, which are both Stephen King movies.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense now why Stephen King is a descendant of Florin.
They don't explain that in the book. Because,
No.
So you told me none of this shit is real. But I was confused because some of that shit is real.
Yeah.
Not all of it, but some of it. Like, so the stories that he tells about the movie, those were also in the memoirs, Carrie Elwes's memoirs about the movie, As You Wish, which, I don't know what that says about me. You know, actually, I know what it does say about me. As You Wish was on Libby, and The Princess Bride was not. I listened to that at work as those memoirs. They were very nice memoirs.
They are.
He's
a very nice person.
They had recordings from many cast and crew members for the memoirs, the audio memoirs. I highly recommend it.
Very good book. Carrie Elwes was super nice when I took my copy to go get signed. He was incredibly nice about it.
Hang on. I don't think we were recording that bit where you explained that.
Oh, so in 2019, I met 3 of the cast members of The Princess Bride, and it was the best day of my life. Carrie Elwes was super nice. He gave me so many hugs, and he told me he liked my shirt because I was wearing a Death Cannot Stop True Love shirt. And he asked me where I got it, so that way he could buy a copy, and he signed my shirt. Chris Sarandon called me a theater nerd. Which, accurate, because I told him, I loved your wife in Into the Woods, and he was like, oh, you're a theater nerd. And I was like, yeah, and then he gave me a hug. He was like, it's okay. I'm a theater nerd, too. And then Wallace Shawn did a panel, and he said during his panel, nobody reads my plays because they're all for old people and they're boring, and they're very intellectual, and nobody likes those kind of plays. And I, being an absolute nerd in college, had read almost all of his plays, so I was very offended. And so when I asked him my question, I said, oh, and by the way, first off, I would just like to say, I love your plays. These are my favorite. And his jaw dropped, and the interviewer threw me a piece of candy for making Wallace Shawn's jaw drop.
Like, it was so theatrical, too, because you were fangirling when you said that. You didn't sound all, like, badass and husky. You were like, I just want to say, I've read all of your plays. These are my favorites. And then, then he leaned forward on stage, like, in that comfy chair of his. And he was like, just total jaw drop. And, like, he was legit dumbfounded. He was dumbfounded that you had read all of his screenplay.
Because I was like, I love The Fever, and I love The Threepenny Opera. And he was like, what? No. And then I asked him a really nerdy question about being a playwright, as you do. And then he went, and the thing about Wallace Shawn is he cannot answer a question in 2 minutes or less. It's always like a 15-minute affair when you ask him a question.
Has cripplingly low self-esteem.
I love him so much. He is the nicest person, so sweet, but he cannot answer a question in 2 minutes or less. He has so many thoughts, and he has to say all of them. And you know what? I feel him, because I'm the same way. I always feel bad whenever I ask a question, or whenever I answer a question, and it's like a 10-minute answer, and they're like, this could have been said in a minute, Cara. And it's like, I know that, but hey, stop it. But no, they were very sweet. So I've met 3 of the cast members.
Yeah.
I'm very sad that I'll never get my copy of The Princess Bride signed by William Goldman, because that was on my bucket list. So if anyone wants to get me something for Christmas, a signed copy of The Princess Bride.
That was actually a really sad moment for me. There's a passage at the end of the 30th anniversary introduction where he says, rest assured, before there's a 50th anniversary edition of this book,
you will have Buttercup's baby. And I was like, shit. Okay, so Buttercup's baby is the sequel to this book.
Yeah, so you get an excerpt at the end of The Princess Bride of Buttercup's baby. And it's very sad because people keep asking about Buttercup's baby. Like, when he was alive, like, every interview he did, they would ask him, when's Buttercup's baby coming out? And I think on one of them, he ended up breaking down and he said, I just can't write it. The fans expect too much, and I don't trust myself to give the fans what they want and give everybody a happy ending and give everyone the ending they deserve. So all we have of Buttercup's baby is the excerpt at the end of this book, which ends on a massive cliffhanger. And that's probably all we'll ever get of Buttercup's baby. Just because if Goldman himself didn't feel like he could do it, then I don't know how I feel about somebody else trying to do it in his stead. I think a lot of fans, myself included, would be absolutely pissed.
What if it was like a direct descendant?
Like, if it was his daughter, then maybe. Like, if it was one of his daughters, then I'd be, like, okay with that. But from what I understand, neither of his daughters have really shown much interest in picking up Buttercup's baby.
But if they did, it would be so funny, because then they could write it framed as his imaginary son or his imaginary grandson.
Yeah.
Because he fabricates an entire backstory for himself. A personal backstory that is not at all representative of his actual life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so that I didn't think that he had actually met Stephen King. I thought that was bullshit. I said that to you. I was like, man, I bet he didn't even meet Stephen King.
And I was like, you do know he wrote Misery, right? Like, he wrote the screenplay for Misery. He wrote the screenplay for Dreamcatcher, which is widely panned as one of the worst Stephen King movies.
Which is a shame,
because it's not William Goldman's fault. I will say that. No, it's because Dreamcatcher is a dog shit story.
Wait, isn't Dreamcatcher an anthology of short stories?
So Dreamcatcher, the one that the movie is, it's about the shit weasels, and that's what they're called in the book. They're aliens that climb up through your...
Wait a minute, Dreamcatcher only told one story, and it was that story?
I think so. Maybe the book was an anthology, but
the
story that the movie is based off of is absolute awful. It's so bad.
There was, in Dreamcatcher, there was a short story that was retelling that one... What was that one Edgar Allan Poe story where the main character, like, bricks up the
Cask of Amontillado.
So he did a story recreating that, where, like, he was fucking so obsessed with this one guy, the main character, and how much he hated him because of his car. It was like the nicest car, and it was like a symbolism of the main character's vanity, because he didn't have any of that stuff. This guy did, though, and I think he was like 2 levels above him at his job or something, and he just fucking hated the guy's guts. He dug a giant hole in the road for a car in the desert, like near a bridge, so the lighting was weird, so the guy wouldn't see it right away, like, because it was under the bridge. And then he covered it up with, like, a bed sheet that looked like... It was total Looney Tunes shit, right? Like, he dug this hole, and he talks about, like, all of the struggle that he went through digging this hole. He slipped, like, 4 discs. But he was like, no, I've got it. He's going to be driving on this road at this time. I'm going to be ready for him. Nobody drives down this road except him. And I know, because I've been watching him, because this main character is a fucking psycho. And then it works. The car perfectly falls into the hole. The dude is fucked up in the car, and he just buries it.
Jesus.
And then he goes home. And then he goes to the hospital, and he talks about how he has to recover from doing all of that. He went to the doctor and everything.
Oh, poor baby. Poor little psycho.
That would have been a better Dreamcatcher movie.
It would have. An anthology movie would have been better, but no, we got Morgan Freeman saying shit weasels on the big screen.
There was another much briefer story about a guy encountering a vampire in the bathroom, and he realizes, like, he sees in the mirror just a stream of piss, and that's it.
What the fuck?
And the vampire's like, shit. Okay, I gotta kill you now. That was a short story.
You can
Stephen
really
King
tell
wrote.
that Dreamcatcher is the one where the drugs just really shine through on that. And Stephen King himself has said that, so...
It was a really interesting book.
Written entirely by cocaine.
It was in my high school library.
Mountains of cocaine. Sometimes when I read Stephen King books, I can just tell, I'm like, wow, when did this cocaine learn how to write?
Mm.
Because you can just tell, like, it's so insane. Like,
But
some
then,
of those books. But then, like, his later stuff.
He got over the drugs.
He got over the drugs, which good for him. And he got sober.
And then he was in this book.
And then he made cameos in The Princess Bride, which good for him. Because apparently he's supposed to be writing Buttercup's baby.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. So if Stephen King doesn't drop Buttercup's baby, I think the only person I would be okay with writing Buttercup's baby other than William Goldman is Stephen King. Because William Goldman set it up. So Stephen King, if you're listening to this, I want Buttercup's baby before the 50th anniversary edition. Get on it.
He's in this book in such an interesting way. Because we're going to get into this. Stephen King wrote a letter to the S. Morgenstern Museum. So in Florin, which is not real.
It's not real.
There is an S. Morgenstern Museum, which is also not real.
I am so bad at geography. Hi, I'm going into school for my graduate school. I'm studying how to teach social studies, and I am so bad at geography that I genuinely thought after reading this book that Florin was a real place. Because I didn't realize that William Goldman was bullshitting me. And I read this book when I was like 14 or 15.
Right.
Because I first listened to it. My mom read me the book when I was 3, and then I watched the movie, and I loved it. And then I read the book when I was 14 or 15, and I was like, well, this is completely different than I remember it. And I thought that Florin was a real place. And it took multiple Google searches. Like, not just, I didn't listen to the first one. I was like, no, Google's wrong. No, Google's wrong. And it got to the point where I used Bing to make sure. Like, do you know, like, Googling is a verb. Binging is not. I got so desperate that I turned to Bing to make sure that Florin wasn't a real place. Do you know how desperate you have to be to use Bing? So desperate.
You just legit have to be that person that's like, nah, Google's evil now. I don't want
Google's evil now.
I'm gonna use Bing.
And
Microsoft's got my back. They made the Office suite.
Yeah, no, Microsoft made Bing. They made the Office suite. They know what they're talking about. And then when Bing was like, no, Florin is not real, I was like, God damn it. Because I wanted so badly after I read that book. I was like, I want to go to the S. Morgenstern Museum. And my mom was like, it's not real.
It tells such a convincing story that you would love to be real, though.
I was like,
can I go
see this bird?
Because this story is that he goes traveling to Florin with his grandson. Like, his grandson asked him for his 10th birthday, can we do this? And they did. And, like, he talks about how they're gonna go and do all of this stuff. But the first thing they're gonna do, because the introduction, the only thing it's about, is the first day of their vacation, which was going to the S. Morgenstern Museum. Specifically, he was going as an academic. Because Stephen King wrote a letter to the curator of the S. Morgenstern Museum to get him special access to a special room with all of S. Morgenstern's stuff. Specifically, his notebooks.
The journal. With Buttercup's baby in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so good. Because the guy, the curator, he's such a shit. And the way Morgenstern frames it, it's like, I want to punch that guy in the face.
Well, he gives 2 different descriptions of the curator. He talks about who the curator, like the impression the curator gives when he first meets him, right? Mm-hmm. He seems like a very nice, charming young man who very charmingly says, do you want to go, are you looking for the little boy's room? That room is far more popular. It's right over there. And he's like, no, I'm here to see you. And then the curator, when he finds out who he is, because at first the curator has no idea who he is, Florin Mail is tragically bad. Very slow. He didn't get the letter till 2 weeks after their trip.
Mm-hmm.
But he was ready to walk away in shame. And so this is the thing. He tells a story that I do honestly wonder is true, because he says it in quotation marks. This actually happened. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, like he has a parenthesis, and he's like, this actually happened. This is a true story.
Yeah.
Because he was at the film festival, because he was a judge at Cannes. And there was no table with his place card, and it was just a hostess screw up. So he was like, am I actually a judge? Did I actually get invited to be a judge?
What is Cannes Film Festival?
So Cannes Film Festival takes place in France. It's the Cannes. And it is one of the prestigious film festivals. It's like Sundance. It's one of those big film festivals where they release the movies, and if they win awards, a lot of times, like at the Oscars, you'll hear 3 award-winning won 3 Cannes awards or won 3 Sundance awards. So it's just another way for like filmmakers to get more prestige. It's just It's like, look at my movie and praise me.
And he was to be a judge at one.
Yeah.
And they didn't have the place card. And he was like, he says at the very beginning, you must know this about me. I am paranoid. I am incredibly paranoid about these things when someone doesn't know who I am, and they should. Because of this true story, supposedly, that happened in France.
Yeah.
Did this actually happen?
I mean, I think so. I believe that he was a judge at Cannes. I don't remember hearing an interview about this, but I do think that did happen.
And so that's part of the reason why this is such a convincing... These introductions
are so convincing, because he sprinkles in the truth throughout the bullshit. Which is how you lie in real life.
Yeah.
Like, you give just enough detail to the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you tell just enough of the truth to tell a convincing lie.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, in essence, like acting.
He doesn't
almost
attempt at all to describe any, what the museum looks like. He describes all the stuff in the museum.
Yeah, like there's Andre's, not Andre's. There's, God, why am I blanking?
Andre the Giant.
Fezzik's. There's Fezzik's, hand, which is huge. It's a humongous hand, which we need to talk about Andre the Giant, I think.
So in this story, Andre the Giant says he went to the museum as part of his research. He did that after he climbed the
cliffs. The cliffs. I climbed them, boss.
What are the cliffs called again? The
Cliffs of Insanity.
The Cliffs of Insanity. He's like, that was not scary. It was the first time. But then I thought about it, and Fezzik would not sleep.
Fezzik would not be scared.
Fezzik would...
Because he does... So Goldman does something that I'm not, super fond of when writers do. Where they write out the dialect. Because every time a writer writes out the dialect, I'm just taken back to Harry Potter and how they write out Hagrid, and I'm just like, this is so fucking corny.
Yeah.
Just let him talk, man.
Yeah.
Just let him talk. You don't have to write out the dialect. That's so dumb.
I mean...
And I hate it when writers do that. But I do think he does it well for Andre.
Because I could totally picture Andre saying it the way he said it.
And I think it's different because Andre was a real person.
And but he does adore Andre. And he tells a story about how all the children on set, the children of people involved with the movie, adored Andre.
Yeah, everybody adored Andre. That was the thing about Andre, was that he was such a genuinely nice human being, even though he had so many problems and, he had so many health issues, and he was just one of the sweetest human beings to walk the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody who has ever worked with Andre the Giant said that Andre was the best part of working. Anytime they got to work on a movie where Andre the Giant was involved, that was the best part of working. Cary Elwes told a story in his memoirs about how Andre had a special four-wheeler.
Yeah.
That was made specifically for him.
Yeah.
And he would zip around set, and he offered Cary Elwes a ride, and Cary was like, I don't know if I should. And he's like, no, it's fine, boss. It's fine. You can ride on it. Except he should not have done it. No. Because his toe got stuck, because it was a special four-wheeler made for a giant. And Cary Elwes, he's not a small man, but he's not a giant. And he ended up
he just bent his toe all the way back.
He bent his toe all the way back. He broke his toe, and that wasn't even that wasn't even the last injury he got on set. Because the thing about Cary Elwes in this movie, it was one of his first big movies. This movie was it for him, because he had been in a few movies. So he was incredibly nervous. Everybody on that set, especially Wallace Shawn, were just incredibly nervous they were going to get fired. like any day. And so Carrie Elwes, he was just trying so hard to like impress them and be like, I'm a professional. I know what I'm doing. I'm so involved. And, you know, they were doing fencing. And when he had initially auditioned for the role, they were like, do you have any fencing experience? And he, of course, lied and said, yes, I do. I have so much fencing experience. And Inigo Montoya, Mandy Patinkin, actually did have fencing experience because he was a theater actor. So he had been trained in how to do stage combat. So he had a ton of fencing experience. Carrie Elwes had none.
Yeah.
So they had to teach him how to fence, and he had to like act like, oh yes, of course, I'm sorry, I'm just so rusty, and everybody knew. They were like, that's okay, Carrie, we understand. But there's a scene in the movie where Count Rugen,
I mean, they were both worked like dogs.
they were, read as you wish. It's so good. It's so good.
There was so much fencing. Like, I mean, he didn't know how to fence. Like, literally, that movie, it was just fencing training for him. Mm-hmm. Like, he can fence now.
He probably could. There's a scene where Count Rugen knocks out Wesley after Buttercup goes back to Humperdinck. Funny. And, you know, they were talking about it, and Carrie's like, hey, Christopher. And he's like, what? You should hit me for real.
You should actually do it.
Hit me for real. It'll be great. And he was like, are you sure? And he was like, yeah, do it. And so they do the shot, and Carrie Elwes blacks out.
Yeah.
He got a concussion. He passed out, and he wakes up in the infirmary, and he's like, was the shot good? And they were like, yeah, it's good. And it's the one that made it in the movie.
Well, he didn't intend to pass out. Like, the dude that agreed to hit him on top of the head
Christopher Guest
didn't intend to hit him quite so hard and felt terrible about it.
But the pommel of the sword, so I have fencing experience as well. The pommel of a sword, we get the word pummel from pommel.
From pommel?
Yeah, it's called the pomme in French because everything fencing comes from either Spain or France. Like, all of your fencing terms will be either Spanish or French. So, pomme is the little round bit at the end of your sword. And if you were too close to use your blade, you would hit him with your pommel. With the pommel. That's where we get pummel from. So, pummel comes from pum.
You just pummel them with your sword.
Yeah, you pummeled them.
Which really, that works when we're talking about a saber or like just a narrow, thin, stabby blade.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't skewer them,
you beat them. You beat them to death.
Fantastic.
And that's what they used to do. So that's where the word pummel comes from. So I find it so fascinating that Carrie, who would have learned all these terms and would have known, oh, that's where pummel comes from, hit me with your sword. Just do it. Hit me with the pummel. It'll be fine.
Just black me out.
Just knock me out, dude. And
he didn't think that.
He didn't think that. And it was fantastic. It was fantastic. And that's the shot that ended up in the movie. So every time you watch The Princess Bride and Wesley gets knocked out by Rugen, Carrie Elwes is passing out for real. So congratulations. And I just find it so fascinating how a lot of movies like use the shots where actors actually get hurt. I mean, and they're like, it's so good though. And it's like,
worked.
Oh my God.
I mean, it worked.
This episode is not brought to you by Greg Bush. Greg is running for Missouri House District 50, and I've known him for a little while now. I know his wife for a little while now, and he is going to be discussing a series of things on the ballot, ballot measures, offices that are in Missouri or in counties in Missouri that are very, very important, things that matter to Greg. So, Greg, what are we talking about today?
Lots of important things on the ballot this November. I can't think of one that's more important right now than Amendment 3. Amendment 3 is going to restore women's rights. It's going to restore reproductive freedom. It's going to restore the ability of women to get an abortion. It's going to restore the ability of physicians to treat the patient in front of them. It's going to kick lawyers and lobbyists out of exam rooms with pregnant people. That is what a yes on Amendment 3 is going to do. Women had the right to a safe and legal abortion, beginning after Roe versus Wade in the 70s, had that for 50 years, and then Dobbs came along and overturned that. So the Dobbs decision overturned the ability of women to get an abortion, and Missouri was one of the first to actually have the trigger law
Within hours.
within hours, exactly, to make to have physicians needing to call an attorney before treating the patient that's in front of them. We've seen women lose their lives because of these awful bans on abortion care and abortion treatment.
It forced thousands of women to have to go out of state to get an abortion,
Exactly
which
right.
is realistically a luxury that not everyone has.
Right. So this is important. We needed 172,000 signatures. We got 380,000 signatures in order to make sure that it is now going to be up to the people to restore women's rights. And that is Amendment 3. So it is important for you to tell your friends and your family and your neighbors, yes on 3. Yes on 3. Yes on 3.
Yes on 3.
Yes on 3.
On 3. Yes on that.
Yes on
3. Make a plan to vote. If you don't have a plan to vote, if you think it's silly to make a plan to vote, it's not. Really think about the logistics of what you need to do to go vote. If you just need to go down the street to vote, awesome. But if like where you need to vote is like 2 miles away, 3 miles away, 10 miles away, and you may not necessarily have a way to get there, figure out the logistics. If you need to carpool with someone, ask someone sooner rather than later because it's on a Tuesday, which is dumb, but it's still on a Tuesday.
You can call local party offices. You can call, as a matter of fact, I believe Uber and Lyft give free rides.
Is that right?
Yes, they have in the past.
Wow.
If you're in Columbia proper, the buses are free that day as well. You can vote early beginning October 23rd. It is yes on 3. Enough of this going backwards and endangering women and our future. Yes on 3. Yes on 3. Yes on 3.
Back to the show. Yes on 3.
Everyone always talks about in Lord of the Rings when Aragorn kicks the helmet and he screams, and it's like, you know that Viggo Mortensen actually broke his toe, right? Like, that's become such a mainstream joke where it's like people who have watched Lord of the Rings over and over again, watching Lord of the Rings with somebody new, and they happen, and it's like, I have to keep in the urge to tell them that Viggo Mortensen actually broke his toe.
See, this is why I want to record everything, right? Because there's a part of me that's like, if it's a good, I want to keep it, right? Like, that's how so many people that do record, like, anything, they're like, I mean, it's a good shot, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's something about, like, and this is like any human that records anything. They're like, I mean, if it's good, I want to keep it.
I mean, yeah. Yeah.
Even if it's embarrassing, it's still good.
Still good. Still good. I want to talk about Miss Roginski in the introduction.
Which introduction?
That's the one right before the actual book starts.
So
the original introduction.
Oh, right.
Miss Roginski is his
Okay.
teacher.
Yes, Miss Roginski.
And I think we've all had a teacher like Miss Roginski who have pushed us. For me, it was always like, it was Miss Cook. She was my 5th grade teacher. And she was like, you could be so good at math if you just tried. And I was like, here's the thing, Miss Cook. I have. And I'm not. So do with that what you will. And because of that, she was like, okay, well, fine. I'm not going to recommend you for the gifted program because you're not good at math. And all gifted kids are good at math. And I was like, have you never heard of the different learners, Miss Cook? Except I didn't say that because I was in 5th grade. Now, having had teaching experience, I know that there are different intelligences, which there are several different intelligences. And it sounds like to me, when William Goldman was talking about how he was so good at sports, he was a natural learner.
Yeah.
And of course they wouldn't have known that when he was growing up because Gardner's multiple intelligences didn't come up until like the 80s or 90s.
All right, for the Peanut Gallery, could you explain that in a little bit more depth? I'm not following.
Hi, I'm getting my master's in education. Gardner's multiple intelligences is a theory that, here, let me look it up real quick. Gardner's multiple intelligences, if I could type correctly. So it's a theory that people are differently gifted in other things. So like there are different intelligences. So I'm going to look up the different intelligences for you.
Good at sports, which is an activity that you learn by playing.
So the different intelligences are bodily kinesthetic, interpersonal, intrapersonal, visual linguistic, logical mathematical, naturalistic, visual spatial, and musical. So there's a lot of different, like, there's just different ways of knowing, like, different intelligences.
Did you say there was, like, 8 there? Or...
Yeah, so there's also linguistic verbal. So there's musical, rhythmic, and harmonic. So these are people who are, like, super good at music. They learn best when they have music. This is a way for teachers to analyze their students, figure out what they need to learn best and how they learn best, so that way they can absorb the material.
I mean, I had my social studies teacher, he played at really low volume when it was, like, study time. It was like he would play just music at a low volume. So we would have to, like, pay attention to listen to it. But because we're just listening to music, it would mean we're paying attention to doing our bookwork.
Mm-hmm. But the way he talks about how he analyzed, like, he memorized stats and he was really good at stats, that tells me he was a bodily kinesthetic learner and that he was logical mathematical. Mm. And if he was good at socializing, he was also an interpersonal learner.
Wait, I'm sorry. Goldman?
Goldman memorized stats, and he was really good at sports, and he was good at socializing with his friends, which tells me bodily kinesthetic,
right,
logical mathematical, and interpersonal. Those are his three. Three learning intelligences. And the thing about learning intelligences are that none of them is worse than the other. Like, they're all equally valid. It's just a way that people can connect their learning to what they're good at. For example, Ryan, I think that you are more of an intrapersonal learner, which means that you are very in touch with yourself.
Yeah.
And you know a lot about yourself. So intra is the knowledge of the self.
Yeah.
I also think that you are logical mathematical and linguistic verbal.
What does that mean?
Linguistic verbal means you have a high verbal intelligence.
Okay, sure.
In logical mathematical, it's reasoning, abstractions, numbers, critical thinking.
Yeah, I do like critical thinking.
So it's just a way for teachers to know these intelligences, take a look at their students, observe their behaviors, and figure out the best way to help them learn the material they are teaching.
Yeah, nobody took the time to figure that out for me.
Well, you did go to an R5 school, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah, it was unfortunate. But I did kind of figure that stuff out for myself in college.
Mm-hmm.
I took an intro to ethics course, and that kind of got the critical thinking going.
Mm-hmm.
Started it early. Yeah.
But Miss Roginski, of course, like, they wouldn't have known Gardner's multiple intelligences in the 40s when Goldman is coming up.
No.
It's a fairly recent concept, so it does sound a lot like teachers who just are so set on teaching their way, which it does sound like Miss Roginski does that. And so at first we're like, oh, Miss Roginski, why? Like, why would you want her to be your mom, dude?
Well, I mean, Miss Roginski did love him, though.
She did, because my favorite thing is when he gets the note and it's like, she didn't even remember me. I never wanted you to be my mom. Screw you, Miss Roginski.
Yeah.
And then he turns it over and it's like, of course I remembered you, idiot. And it's like, nice. I don't think a teacher would talk to their student that way, but nice. It was the 50s or 60s.
She is also fictional. And Goldman wrote her.
Goldman did write her.
So, glean from that what you will.
What I really love about Goldman's writing, and this book in particular, is how dry it is.
Yeah.
It's very dry, sarcastic humor, which is just so lovely.
Yeah.
And I think it really shaped the people who read the book or who watched the movie at a formative age. I think it really shaped their sense of humor.
Yeah.
And I think it shaped how they read stories. Because for me, nothing could compare to The Princess Bride when I was little. It was my favorite book from the time I was 3 years old. Nothing could beat it. Even though I never read the book, the story was just so good to me that any other book couldn't compare. Like, a lot of kids my age, like when we were growing up, Harry Potter was coming out. And, I mean, I liked it, but it wasn't my favorite. I was never the Harry Potter obsessed kid.
So,
ever.
I think what you're talking about is interesting because there's a metaphor for that in the introduction, right? The metaphor being that when his father read The Princess Bride to him, everything changed because he took that story in and then suddenly was in love with reading, and that was all he did. He would read friggin' everything.
And that was where I was as a child.
And that's what Harry Potter was for me. Like, those were the first chapter books that I actually wanted to read. Before that, it was all picture books. It was all books that had like 3 sentences on them with a nice picture on each page. And then did you know that, what were they? The Berenstain Bears? They had a chapter book.
Yeah.
I started reading the chapter book. I only got to and this was when I was like 7. I got to like chapter 2 and I'm like, this is boring. And then I picked up Harry Potter.
For me, the first chapter books I became super interested in was A Series of Unfortunate Events, which I think is so fascinating because it's that same dry sense of dark humor that's so present in The Princess Bride. And I can definitely see, like, as an adult now, I can see the connection I made between The Princess Bride and Lemony Snicket because it's the same dry sense of humor. So, like, I think a lot of people feel that way, either having seen the movie or read the book. A lot of people feel very strongly. I think the coolest thing during COVID that happened was when those celebrities were recreating The Princess Bride in quarantine.
When
a lot of celebrities during the pandemic, they all did their own takes on famous scenes from The Princess Bride, and they compiled them together and remade the movie in their houses in quarantine. Like, Hugh Jackman did a scene as Humperdinck, and it was so funny. And they got, who was it? He was in How I Met Your Mother. He played not Ted. He played the other guy who was married to Marshall. Marshall was Andre the Giant, and his Andre the Giant impression is so good. It's so good. And, you know, they had, like, the guy who voiced Olaf and Frozen, and just all of these celebrities came back and redid The Princess Bride. And then Wisdoms, one of the coolest things I ever saw, we donated to Wisdoms in 2020.
There was a charity
donation
to get access to the live stream.
Yeah, to get access to the live stream. And they brought back as many people as they could to read the screenplay of The Princess Bride. And so that was just, like, it was a very, like, exclusive live stream. You had to donate a certain amount of money, and I was willing to donate that, and we watched it, and it was so cool to watch because there was also, like, a chat where people could ask questions and they would get answers. There was a live stream chat that we were a part of, and it was the coolest thing. And I'm pretty sure I cried, like, no less than 4 times.
It was really interesting because that was for the 2020 election, right?
Yeah, it was for the 2020 election because Wisconsin was a swing state that year. And so it was to Wisdoms, and we were donating to Wisdoms, which I still get emails from, but they haven't done anything as cool as the Princess Bride reread, so I'm not interested. Make of that what you will.
I mean, you really, really wanted to see as much of the original cast as possible read.
I think the only one they had to replace was, of course, Andre the Giant.
Yeah.
And that was the guy from Olaf, Josh Gad. Josh Gad voiced Andre the Giant that time.
Okay.
And his Andre impression was also really good, which makes sense because Josh Gad is a Broadway trained actor. He originated the role of Elder Cunningham in Book of Mormon, which Book of Mormon is, again, one of my favorite shows. I like the new rewrites that it's gone through since COVID, since it's came up, because originally it was really racist. The way that they treated the Africans. Book of Mormon.
Oh, yeah.
So Book of Mormon is a show about 2 Mormon missionaries who are 19 years old. They go to Africa to spread the word of the Book of Mormon. And the way they treated the Africans in that show, like the way they're written, is not very great, which what do you expect from the writers of South Park? You know, the writers of South Park wrote this musical.
I mean,
But it's undergone a lot of rewrites and retreatments since the pandemic. I think they've changed a lot of things, and I prefer the way they've changed it. But we keep getting off topic.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of is how this show tends to go. People they're sitting in this chair and they're talking to that mic, and they'll just talk about the most interesting stories that they can think of.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it is extremely off topic. That is how this show has gone so far.
Well, do you have any questions about The Princess Bride?
Not questions so much as I like to just kind of go through like the story and riff on it.
Mm.
That's what I do. That's not your approach to this, because for you, The Princess Bride is very much the stories about the story. Like it's because it's a whole. You grew up with it. It's a whole thing. You know, like this is so much of your childhood, and for like family reasons. Like it was something that your family loved.
For my dad's wedding gift, which Happy Father's Day, by the way. We're recording this on Father's Day. I'm sure it won't come out. Yeah, I should. Sure, it won't come out on Father's Day, but Happy Father's Day. Late to those who are listening to this. For my father's gift at our wedding, I gave him an annotated copy that was annotated by me of The Princess Bride, so that way he could keep it and read it to our grandchild when it came time for him to read books to our grandchild.
He gave me at the reception a 6-fingered man glove, which I think we still have.
We should.
It's in the garage, I believe. We should get a 3D 6-fingered hand to put the glove on and see if it fits.
But yeah, so The Princess Bride is a huge deal to me. What I really enjoy is they have this map at the very beginning of the book. Oh yeah,
I saw that too.
And so you can go through. When I was younger, I've gone through like 4 or 5 copies of The Princess Bride because I read and I reread it, and it's my comfort book. So whenever before I was diagnosed and before I had my medication, I would just read and reread and reread and reread The Princess Bride. So I would just start at page 1, and then when I finished, I would turn back to page 1 and start over again because it was my comfort book. And I think a lot of people have books like that where they can't stop revisiting the story. And I always get something new when I read The Princess Bride. And
so here's the rub. I never have read this book. So my approach to this is, I'm going to talk about what's there. And so I don't have very much to contribute other than what is here and what I've looked at. But that's okay, because that actually is a lot to contribute to this. I really enjoyed the imaginary grandson that he invented. Willie. Yeah. So I mentioned earlier how there's he talks about 2 versions of the curator. So there's the initial meeting him, and then there's after the guy said, "Oh yeah, Stephen King told me who you were," and he's like, "I really loved these 2 works that you did. You were a great writer once." And Willie,
he's still a great writer.
Oh, right. He was he was immediately defending his grandfather, and Goldman's like, "And you don't think I didn't love him for that? I loved him for that, but I shushed him." And then they go into they go into the secret study. It's not secret, but it's always locked up. Not very many people get into this room. And he's reading the Princess Bride diary, which I guess it was the journal that S. Morgenstern, who is not real, wrote when he wrote the original story. I love how also he makes a comment in here about how people in Europe panned this book. They were like, "How fucking dare you cut out all of these other bits?" And he's like, "I left in the good bits for, people 10-year-olds in America." And they were like, "How dare you? I love the idea because he talks about this too, about how it's history, right? And he has this really interesting thing about how when he was writing this story, he wanted to be sure not to change anything essential. And then he was so surprised when he saw that S. Morgenstern, the guy who wrote the original Princess Bride, was also talking about changing history. Because apparently, in the original telling of the Princess Bride, in this meta, not real, he's S. Morgenstern.
Well, here's the thing, also, is that in the universe, the events of the Princess Bride actually happened.
Right.
It's actual history.
Mm-hmm.
And so he says, like, hey, we can't, he thinks about having Inigo die.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is you can't reverse history just to make it more dramatically satisfying.
Is what he says, which
Yeah.
I find is so interesting because the actual writer who wrote this about this fiction that he is transposing himself into. It's just such a weird self-insert that he makes work.
Mm-hmm. Well, also, he wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
He did, and he talks about that in his introduction.
So, and the thing about Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, they die at the end of that movie. Like, they don't show them die. They die at the end of that movie.
And that's what he talks about in the introduction is, when I was writing that, I felt I couldn't change history, even though I wanted them to live, and that would have been a better story.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't have. That's not historically what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then S. Morgenstern's talking about this same thing, and then they jump the horse and they talk about a giant talking bird.
Well, I want to go back to the Inigo bit.
The Inigo bit,
because I actually, this is well known. Mandy Patinkin's father died of cancer. And so when Inigo and Rugen are dueling and he says, offer me anything, offer me jewels, offer me money. And he says, I'll give you anything I want. And Inigo says, I want my father back, you son of a bitch.
Yeah.
That wasn't acting for Mandy.
Yeah.
He was, like, Mandy Patinkin has straight up said, that was me talking to cancer. Because he lost his father from cancer. And so the story of Inigo Montoya is incredibly personal to Mandy Patinkin. And it's a part of the movie that gets me every time. Like, I cry little tears every time that happens because it's so emotionally satisfying.
Which I think, because this is the 30th anniversary introduction we're talking about, might have had an influence on Goldman when he wrote this introduction. Because he talks about how, like, so S. in this narrative, S. Morgenstern is talking about how he decided to change history and be like, okay, no, Inigo gets to kill the six-fingered man, and Wesley will just have to be content with killing Humperdinck.
Investing Humperdinck.
Besting Humperdinck, yeah.
Yeah. Because he says, and when I wrote those words, I realized that what I wanted most on earth is that I cannot have is my own father back.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, ooh.
Yeah, that struck me when I read that. I was like, well, you know what? Okay, you got me. Yeah, keep that in, obviously.
Yeah.
Don't change history. Like, change history and make that moment a thing for people with daddy issues. Such as myself. Such as Mandy Patinkin. Such as Inigo Montoya.
Because the thing that the movie skips over is the backstories for Fezzik and Inigo. Because they go into...
They gloss over it.
They gloss over it. In the book, you get a very detailed backstory of what Inigo's father was like. And you get that backstory of how Inigo became the world's greatest fencer. You get that backstory of what Fezzik was like. Because honestly, I think Fezzik's backstory is the cutest backstory. Because he's this huge giant... Like, he's a giant child. Like, he's fully grown. And his dad is like, you're going to be a wrestler. You know, like, because all the kids bully him. And he's bigger than them. He's like, you need to learn how to wrestle. You need to learn how to defend yourself. And the big thing about Fezzik, he doesn't want to hurt anybody. He is literally a giant teddy bear. And he doesn't want to hurt anybody. And there's a moment where his dad is like, just punch me, son. Just punch me. And he's like, I don't want to, daddy. Punch me. Punch me. And so he punches him. And Fezzik's dad had to have the mailman wire his jaw shut.
Yeah.
Because Fezzik punched him. And it is the funniest thing. It is so funny.
He's like, I don't want to punch you.
I don't want to punch you, Daddy. I don't want to punch you. And it's so good. It's such a good backstory. And, you know, Vizzini is a lot more villainous in this.
Yeah.
Which I love the character of Vizzini. There's a lot more about Humperdinck in here and why he chose Buttercup. Like, we get a lot more that, you know, just wouldn't have made sense to put in a movie. Like, there's this whole thing about why Florin and Gilder are fighting again, because they've always been going back and forth on fighting. And I think in, like, the first 2 chapters, you find out, oh, well, Humperdinck was supposed to marry...
More Miracle Max.
Yeah, there's mention of Miracle Max at the beginning, but there is less Miracle Max than what there is in the movie, because Miracle Max...
Oh.
Because Billy Crystal improved everything.
Yeah, he improved for like a day on set.
There's like 1 or 2 lines in the book that were Miracle Max's in the book, and that made it to the movie. But the rest was all Billy Crystal. And you'll recognize those lines when you're reading through the book.
Mm-hmm.
And Valerie, oh God, Carol Kane.
She riffed too.
Well, they used to be co-stars together.
And so
they were, I'm pretty sure they were married.
Well,
or they are married still, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that's what it was, right?
I think they're husband and wife. Let me Google it.
Yes.
See, there we go again. Googling as a verb. I'm telling you, nobody used binging. Except maybe Bing Crosby. But, nope, they were not married. I don't think. I'm looking it up on Wikipedia.
They worked together a lot, I believe.
Yeah. It doesn't say who she's married to. But they've worked together a lot.
So yeah, I said at the beginning how this is kind of like we see a regression of character. Just because of the way it's structured. 30th anniversary introduction, then 25th anniversary introduction. And he's like, hey, 30th introduction, I would have said, why are you reading this? There should not be a 30th anniversary book. Go read the 25th anniversary book. It's great. I talk about movies and how hard it is to make one and other stuff like that, which is what the 25th anniversary introduction was about. I found I wasn't super interested in that one just because a lot of those stories, the true ones, were in the memoirs.
Yeah.
The not true ones, though, were peppered throughout. Like when he was talking to he talks about that imaginary conversation with Andre where
he climbed the cliffs.
And then he goes to the museum and he tells Goldman all about the museum and he's like, but did I go to the museum? Certainly not.
Certainly.
I did not go to that museum. Much later in life. And then, yeah, the main introduction, which is all about him being on vacation and wanting to cheat on his wife with this really hot lady, and then, but his son takes precedent over that. It's like his son is up here at the top, right?
Yeah.
He values his son a whole time.
Hot ladies.
Hot ladies are a bit below that, and then his career is under that. And then
all the way down here is
his wife.
Is Helen.
Is Helen, who is
his psychiatrist wife.
His psychiatrist wife is great for him.
Who's awful to the help.
She is awful to the help.
She's like, oh, we found a treasure, and then he likes his roast beef. This is roast beef. And then she's like, there's another treasure down the tubes. And it's like, you can tell that Helen is a wasp.
Yeah.
She is that white Anglo-Saxon Protestant mom, you know,
who expects perfection, and if she doesn't get it, you're fired. And it's like, okay, she's gone through 7 in the past 8 months.
yeah
or something like that.
And
what
then,
is it that he says?
Oh my gosh, it's so funny.
He says something like that, but yeah. And so he's obsessed with getting this.
And
what was it?
I love the sweet child. Be logical. If you do not eat your potatoes, you will be upset, and I will be upset. Your father, clearly, is already upset. Mm-hmm. If you do eat your potatoes, I shall be pleased, you will be pleased, your tummy will be pleased. We can do nothing about your father. You have it in your power to upset all or one, about whom, as I have already said, we can do nothing. Therefore, the conclusion should be clear, but I have faith in your ability to reach it yourself. Do what you will, Jason. And then he began to stuff it in.
He sighed and then ate his potatoes.
Oh my god. And he ate his potatoes. And I love it.
That's how my dad would talk to me. If I didn't eat my food, he'd be like, all right, I mean, you don't have to eat, but you'll be upset about it.
My mom was like, you'll eat that food and you'll like it.
Yeah. And so yeah, he then goes on to tell about how he decided that he was going to take it upon himself to put his movie deal. What was the movie that supposedly he put on
Stepford
hold?
Wives, which he did write the Stepford Wives movie.
He supposedly put Stepford Wives on hold to write this book, the Good Bits version of The Princess Bride.
Which he wrote the original Stepford Wives, not the bad remake. Because let me be clear, that remake is awful. I hate that remake. The original is much more horror-based, and I love it, and it's so good, and William Goldman did an amazing job writing it. Rant over.
Rant over. He put that movie on hold to write the Good Bits version of The Princess Bride, and then he closes it out saying, what was it? Basically. Anyway, here's the good parts version. My father read it to me. Now I give it to you. What you do with it will be of more than passing interest to us all.
Which, our child will be read this book.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that went without saying. It's a great, it's a great movie. Presumably it's a great book. I haven't read it yet.
I mean, if I could get away with it, I would want our child's nursery to be Princess Bride themed, but I do think that would be a bit overkill. Because I would just want the map of Gilder painted on one of their walls.
You'd want this map?
Yeah, I'd want that map recreated on one of their walls. As a mural.
I don't see why you couldn't.
But we've already decided on a Winnie the Pooh theme. So.
Yeah, I do enjoy the Winnie the Pooh theme. That would be simpler.
Yeah.
This would be a mural.
Yes.
It's a very nice mural.
Yes.
Very simple as murals go. But a mural nonetheless.
Yes. But, yeah, so the next 3 chapters are the story in earnest, or as earnest as the Princess Bride gets. So we'll stop.
Hold on. So chapter 1 is the bride.
And then chapter 2.
Where does chapter 2 start?
I'm trying to find it.
Fair enough.
Because it starts on page 71. Chapter 2 is the groom.
Wait, hang on. The first chapter is from page...
It's a long one.
It's from page 37
to 69.
To 69. Ay.
Nice. And then chapter 2 is the groom, and it is much shorter. And then chapter 3 is the courtship.
Chapter 2 is the groom, which goes.
So this is chapters 2 and 3 right here. That's how short chapters 2 and 3 are.
Chapter 2 is extremely short,
and chapter 3 is a little bit longer, but not by much.
81 or so to.
We might include chapter 4 in there too.
To 90.
We might include chapter 4.
How many pages did we read?
We read
for this?
Quite a few. So this is, if we include chapter 4, this is where we're at.
Okay, so if we do 3 chapters, though, that is pages 37 to 90.
Mm-hmm. So that's up to you.
And then chapter 4
is literally a page and a half.
So for me, chapter 4 is literally a page and a half?
Yeah.
Okay, well then, fuck it. Let's shoot. Wait, hang on. How long is chapter 5? How much of this should we read? Is chapter 5 a long one?
I'm trying to find that out for you.
It appears to be.
Yeah, I believe
90,
so.
Page 95 to...
Oh, hold on. There's a table of contents. What are we doing?
The table of contents actually does not provide the original chapters. The table of contents for this book, sadly, it talked about what page the 30th anniversary edition starts on, which is Roman numeral 7. Introduction to the 25th anniversary edition, Roman numeral 31, and then The Princess Bride, page 1. But it's not even really The Princess Bride yet. It's the original introduction. Chapter 1 of this book starts on page 35. Sorry, 37. Which isn't even actually page 37.
Let's read chapters 1 through 4.
Let's read chapters 1 through 4. And the episode after that, just chapter 5.
So if you want to read along with us, you can.
Your homework will be to read chapters 1 through 4 of The Princess Bride.
I am expecting a 3-page essay turned into me and turned into Ryan. I won't give out emails because don't give out home addresses. Don't give out email addresses on the internet, kids. That's how you get hacked.
Don't give out email addresses?
You don't want to get hacked.
Okay.
You'll
So-
just write your 3-page essay.
So you don't want us to provide an email for people to
yeah,
email to?
this is the honor system. We're just gonna use the honor system. I'll
Okay.
trust that you wrote this 3-page
Okay,
essay.
honor system, homework, chapters 1 through 4. And that is for the next episode
Yeah.
where we talk about chapters 1 through 4 and you won't be confused.
Yeah. Exactly. You get it. You understand what
Okay.
I'm going for.
This has been Functionally Literate. I'm Ryan.
I'm Cara.
Bye.
Bye.